So Sonia, all righty. Hi, good guys. This is the closing talk for day one of the unconference. I am extremely thrilled. And with me, I have my very dear friend Ashutosh Bhatawadekar. Ashutosh is an agile expert. Ashutosh is a technology expert. Ashutosh is also someone who started his career with testing. And today he will help us with how we can build our strategy, our one-pager strategy. So Ashutosh, without wasting any more time, I want to pass on the mic. But before starting your session, we want you to share about who you are. We want our audience to become familiar with you, and when can they reach to you?
Okay, sure. Thanks, Deepti. And yeah, first of all, it's a privilege and an honor to be once again a part of another event. I think I have been a part of a lot of your events, and this is really an honor to be here. Yeah, they can always reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm available on LinkedIn. The surname is a little tongue twister, but I'm sure people know about it. I mean, there's a character in a Bollywood
It
movie by that.
helps to make you distinguish. Yeah, I had to literally
Okay.
remember it speaking multiple times.
Correct. Okay. So, of course, not as famous as Tendulkar, Gavaskar, and the Venksakas of the world. Anyways, yeah. So, about myself, yeah, Ashutosh Bhatawadekar here. Currently, of course, been in an agile coaching space for last, I would say, 10 to 12 years. But my journey started with testing, and testing is something which, I mean, I can say that it's one of the passion which I have with me. And I'm a big fan of old Bollywood classics, Hollywood classics, you name it. I mean, Roman Holiday, I can watch it even now. I mean, if there's a choice offered between this session and Roman Holiday, I think you got where my vote would go. Anyways, kidding, just kidding here. Yeah, but I mean, come September, I watched it yesterday because the month September was there. So I just wanted to tell some other side of my personality. Love those very old classic Hollywood and Bollywood movies is what I love. And yeah, as I said, here to talk about a testing strategy and this is something which has come from my experience from a real grounded applications which I've been working upon. I'll try to present some of the strategies which I have developed over the years, which I have used, which I have also coached. Luckily, these have also helped in my coaching journey, especially when I was coaching the QA team in an agile transformation. At the onset, I would like to say it is always difficult to actually have a session when the opening batsman is TV. So definitely there is some degree of, I would say, some I would say in my mind apprehension, but nevertheless, I'll try my best to do it. Okay. And yeah, let me share my screen and let me know if all of you can see my screen. Are you all able to see the screen? I hope it is
Yes.
visible now. Okay,
Yes.
great. Yeah, so I will be talking about some fundamental principles of testing, which will help us formulate a testing strategy. And rather than talking about a one page, I would like to replace that one pager, although the objective is to have a one pager, and I'll talk about that one pager strategy. But the basic objective is to have a leaner process. I mean, can we have a lean process, or can we have something which is a toned down version rather than having a big strategy? Because normally what happens is the moment we hear the word strategy, we tend to unnecessarily create bulky documents. We unnecessarily create big volume books, which probably no one goes through all the pages, right? And so that's where that name one pager came or stuck to my mind. And as I said, many of these I have been implementing, I have worked around them. I also sometimes conduct workshops on some of these strategies, and I'll talk about what kind of a use case or a case study goes into those workshops. And of course, we won't be able to do that workshop in this span of time, but definitely anytime in the future, we can talk about it. Yes, and that's about me. I mean, Ashutosh Bhatawadekar here. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I also have a community called Pune Agile Thought Leaders, a typical Pune at heart. I think I forgot that in the invite. So Chitale Bakarwadi, those of you who know, I'm a big fan of those, the Shrewsbury biscuits in Pune. So next time any one of you come, do call me. I'll be more than happy to take to these places and marzorin sandwiches and coffee. Yeah, I mean, that's what I really love on any day, right? On a typical Saturday or a Sunday. Anyways, without talking much about myself, let me try to deep dive directly into the topic. And just a quick kind of a check. I think fundamental testing process. I mean, if you look at the fundamental testing process, which is there are 7 key principles of software testing. I'm not going into the details of this. I'm assuming that folks already know about it. There is nothing called as testing shows what we call as absence of defect. It is a misnomer, right? Testing shows presence of defect, not absence of defect. Exhaustive testing is impossible. Early testing, a stitch in time saves nine, the age-old adage, what we know. Defect clustering, testing which is contextual, which is context dependent, depending on the application you are having. Pesticide paradox and absence of error fallacy. I think we all have gone through these testing principles. We have all learned it, and those of you who would have done any of the testing certifications would be already, you would have by hearted these principles in order to get those certification. The reason why I put it here is not to go through these 7 principles of testing. The reason why I put here is that any test strategy you take, okay, and I'll talk about some of the testing strategies as we go along. The overarching piece is this 7 principles. You cannot really have a testing strategy which actually is not including any of these 7 principles of testing. So if you look at my toolbox of testing strategy, and I'm sure each one of us would have their own toolbox of testing strategy, whether it's a traditional software testing strategy or a risk-based testing approach or an exploratory testing, or for that matter, the agile testing strategy, ad hoc testing, experience-based testing, exploratory testing, you name any testing strategy, it has to actually overlap all these 7 principles. Otherwise, the strategy is bound to fail. Okay, so that is the context behind which I decided to set up this particular talk with, right? To start with this. So any testing tomorrow, let's say you come out with a new testing strategy, it will be some way or the other linked to the fundamental testing principles which are there. Just borrowing something which Tathagat mentioned in his talk earlier, that it's not just testing strategy, but also an AI and a data science strategy which you have to formulate. So obviously those strategies will have to also include the principles related to that. But coming back to this topic of fundamental testing principles, any testing strategy will be overlapping these fundamental testing principles. And if they are not doing, then definitely we are missing into it. Now, let me take you to the good old world, maybe a world which was around 20 years back. And if you remember, this was a document we all used to have, right? A big, bulky test strategy document is what we used to have, right? And believe me, I'm not opening that document here. This document used to run around 20-25 pages minimum. But if you ask a question to anyone, have you read this? Do you know what that document says? People used to be actually puzzled. So do we really read those many documents? Do we really read such a big document which we have created? Or is half of the information like that a user manual? Nowadays, when you buy any product, right? When you go to electronic product, let's say you buy a laptop, or let's say you buy, let us say, a mobile phone. How many of us do we really go through the user manual? I mean, yes, we might be going probably once, probably, and then we might trash it out, right? Or it is now digitized, right? And even the user manuals have become much more agile, if I were to say, leaner, if I were to use the term, right? They are not the ones which were bulky, big booklets, which used to get maybe 20-25 years back, right? The user manuals today are probably a pager document, a 1-pager document, which we have. And they tell you that, okay, if you have any doubt, you can go on this link and where there is a information which is available. So the same analogy I would like to apply for a test strategy document, that it has to be at the end of the day, something which people would live with it, something which people would use with it. So rather than going in for that box, if you look at this 2-dimensional matrix, which I have, where the level of documentation is very, very high. So it is starting from high to low. And the impact to testing, or what impact we are going to derive out of this, is very, very minimal. That is the old and the traditional approach which is there. I'm not saying that you should not have high user documentation. It is definitely required for safety critical systems. So whether you take the air traffic control software or medical devices, or testing for, let us say, any banking application as such, I mean, more than banking, I would say the safety critical part of it, the medical sciences, or let's say an electronic blood pressure measuring instrument, or a diabetic sugar count instrument, you definitely need a good amount of documentation. But always try to explore, is there a possibility of a leaner approach? Like just like that product which you just brought from a Chroma or a Reliance Digital or from Amazon, if you bought an electronic product, how they have managed to keep their documentation to so much of a minimal. And they are products which are not as easy to use as they were earlier, right? So how do we move from a traditional approach, which is, I mean, again, I'm not saying that everything about waterfall is bad. I have grown and literally earned my career through waterfall, but definitely there is a scope of improvement, which will help us to make our document into a leaner approach. The test strategy document is a good starting point. And then, of course, we can look at other documents or testing artifacts, be it, let us say, the test scenarios or test plan, or even the way the test data is collated and put into the test environment, and masking and unmasking of the test data. So those obviously will be a later part of it, but test strategy is something which definitely has got a scope of improvement, which we can definitely go ahead and do the improvement around it, right? So what is that leaner approach? What exactly is that leaner approach? Can we have a process light approach? Can we do something faster and focus more on the actual piece of testing rather than spending, let us say, 5 days on a test strategy document? Can I do that in probably a half a day or a 1 day, and then spend rest of the time in firming up my test scenarios? Thereby I achieve a higher coverage. So that is the philosophy or the thought behind this. There's nothing to do this particular talk. I mean, whatever test strategy activities I'll be talking about, or test strategy scenarios I'll be talking about, it's not that they can only be used in an agile world. They can be used even in a traditional world with some kind of a tweaking or with some kind of a customization. You can always go ahead and tweak those techniques which I'm going to talk about. All right, so let us move ahead and let us try to understand how do we make this journey from a content rich, okay, from a kind of a thick document to a thin document, wherein the testing activities are front loaded rather than being back loaded. Another challenge with the traditional approach is that my testing is at the back side, right? I mean, it is at the extreme right hand side. So how do I make it from the extreme right hand side to the left hand side? So that also is one of the challenges what we have. The shift left strategy is how do I bring about it. Now, one of the very well known testing strategy we all know and this is used in the industry for quite long, and again, as I said, this has nothing to do with agile. We were using it in the traditional approach also, is what we call as a risk based testing strategy. As we all know, every module we classify it on the basis of the impact it has to the business and the probability, and also what is the chance that if we do not deliver this feature, is there any penalty associated with that feature? Is there any I would say penalty in terms of money, penalty in terms of legal suit, penalty in terms of users not able to do the transactions? Is there any risk associated with that? And the impact what it carries, right? So probability and impact, a very, very basic equation of any risk-based testing model. And this model, if you look at the risk-based testing model, you can use it for something like this, right? I mean, let's say you have a total of, let us say, I'm just taking a hypothetical example here. We have ranked these modules in terms of risk. And let us assume that we don't have 100% of time for executing these 11,500 test cases. Let us say my time has been curtailed by, let us say, X percentage. Now we have time for running only around 7,700 test cases. So we could have a risk-based testing strategy approach, which I've tried to depict there. Approach one could be that I do an equal distribution, very straightforward, right? A simple mathematical calculation, which will have that percentage distribution of the test cases in the overall contribution, and I will try to do it. But that is a very easy thing, right? I mean, that life is not that easy, right? I mean, you will see stakeholders saying, no, you know what, my module is the most important module, or my module is the most riskiest module. So I want 100% execution of test cases for my module. It happens many times in the conversations we have, right? So let us say A and B are the two important modules, and we really cannot skip any testing there. We really cannot skip any of the test cases. All these test cases are of equal importance. So definitely those contribution will be 100%. So the remaining we have to distribute in a ratio. Remaining testing, we have to distribute it in a ratio, which we can calculate using a simple mathematical formula again, right? That is what we have it as an approach to of a risk-based testing strategy, or a risk-based testing approach is what we have. So I'm dividing C, D, and E amongst the earlier ratio. Okay, so whatever is the earlier ratio of 2800 plus 1800 plus 900, that is 5,500. It is not depicted there. That 5,500, I'm going to distribute it. Sorry, not 5,500. It is around, I mean, that 5,500 gets converted into 1,700, which is what is the distribution between C, D, and E. So 1,700 is the approximate test cases which I will have for C, D, and E. So that's another approach you can have. Again, there are multiple permutations and combinations possible. I have also seen a combination where module A, they say that, you know what, out of that 3,400, 75% of the test cases you do as it is. The rest 25, we don't have time. Let us only do 10% of those 25. So again, you have to build in an algorithm. You have to again build in that engine, which will calculate how much time you have for these test cases to be executed, right? Or do we really have 100% of the time which is available for these test cases to be executed, right? So that's the basic fundamental risk-based testing strategy or an approach. Obviously, this has been done in a traditional approach. Many times, one drawback or one con of this method is we may not know the probable test cases of all the modules. That could be one of the challenge. But then again, you can do an estimation. You can do an estimation around the approximate number of test cases you will have and whether it is possible to execute those test cases in that given time frame. And if at all we would like to scale it down, how much we should be scaling down, which are the test cases we should be scaling down, which are the test cases we should be executing as we move along. Now, where I had used this, or rather, I would say that when I conduct a risk-based testing strategy workshop, the best example I give for this approach is the meeting functionality in Microsoft Outlook. I think we all use this functionality in our day-to-day life, where you have to set up a meeting, where there's a start time, there's an end time, and there's a meeting duration. And if you see, there are 4 combinations broadly which are possible: a daily meeting, a weekly meeting, a monthly meeting, and a yearly meeting. Okay, so that is the middle portion which decides the frequency of the meeting. The top band decides the time. The middle band decides the frequency based on the occurrences, daily, weekly, yearly, or monthly. And then at the bottom band decides the range of occurrences, right? A range. When do you want to start the meeting from? After how many occurrences would you like to end? Or would you like to have no end date? Right? Or end by a particular date. Now, believe me, if you try to figure out the test cases for this application, a very simple application, I mean, probably we would have never thought that it would be as many cases we would get. There would be minimum of 100 to 150 test cases which would come out of it. So again, we will never have time to test it. We will never have time to test this kind of an application, especially if your meeting is going to happen monthly and yearly. So again, risk-based testing strategy will have to be applied here. You will have to decide how many of these 100, 150 test cases what you have, you really have time for executing. Which are the important scenarios? Which are the most important scenarios which are there? For example, someone might say that I never have a yearly meeting, but you know what? That is also important. You should, I mean, yearly meetings are also there, right? Especially, let's say if you have an insurance renewal premium, there's a reminder which comes, or your anniversary. You might want Outlook to give that, right? Your anniversary or your birthdays reminders, right, of a loved ones. Definitely, you will require Outlook to give that, right? And you have to test that functionality. So you can't say that yearly I'm never going to use. Okay, monthly also, you might have a once a month project status review meeting, a daily Scrum meeting, right? Or a weekly status review meeting. So definitely there are multiple permutations and combinations possible. Some of you might say that, okay, I don't need a Sunday, and a Sunday we never have a meeting. Yeah, fair enough. So you might want to exclude that test case in a risk-based testing scenario. Or Saturday, we don't really have meetings. So Saturday and Sunday, I will not test it. I will test the functionality from Monday to Friday. Okay, there are also some very interesting scenarios in that, by the way, if you have carefully observed it. Just try to select a weekly option. It will either allow you to, or monthly option. It's more for monthly option. Just try to select monthly 7th day of a month. Okay, try to select monthly 31st of every month, or a last day of a month. Okay, so there are 2 options, monthly 31st or monthly last day. There are different test cases, right? Because not all months have got 31st as a date, right? So you'll have to be very careful, and you have to also do it very carefully for a yearly option for a leap year. So what I'm trying to tell is these are some of the scenarios what you'll have to really think when you're deciding the testing approach or your testing strategy. Also, it has got an option for the first Wednesday of the month, the second Wednesday of the month, the 5th Wednesday of the month. Not all months have got that option, right? Not all months have got a fifth Wednesday or a fifth Monday. So those are interesting, I would say, cases which we have to decide as a part of the test strategy approach for this kind of an application. So as I said, I mean, risk-based testing is when I take a workshop, these are the kind of test cases which I mean, this is a scenario which I give them, and I ask team to formulate all the possible combinations, permutations and combinations, and then try to figure out that if you are a test strategist, what will be your priority? Which are the test cases you will prioritize the most? Which are the test cases you will prioritize the least? Again, this is also contextual, I agree, because I might not have a monthly meeting, I might not have a yearly reminders or a yearly meeting, but nevertheless, it gives a great amount of detailing around how you should be applying the strategy for a risk-based testing strategy. And by the way, this, as I said, it continues in the agile world. When you have lesser time for a sprint, right? When you have a sprint demo coming up or a sprint review coming up, you would definitely like to apply a risk-based testing strategy wherein you like to figure out how many test cases you can really execute at a point in time. Okay, let us move to the next approach. The next approach is based on the famous agile testing quadrants. Everyone aware about this? What exactly are these 4 quadrants about? This is a very famous model by Lisa Crispin, where she talks about the 4 testing quadrants of agile, right? I mean, from a testing perspective, the 4 quadrants which are there, a very interesting model. Let me quickly brief. So if you look at it, this model has got 2 elements on the x-axis, and it has got 2 elements on the y-axis. So on the bottom x-axis, we have technology facing tests. And on the top y-axis, top x-axis, sorry, we have the business facing tests. So tests which are technology focused, tests which are business focused. Okay, business facing and technology facing. The left y-axis talks about tests which actually support the team. So if you get a defect in any of these test cases in the green box and in the blue box, it is actually beneficial for the team, because the defect has not reached the customer. It is a cheaper defect to solve. We all know that classic curve, right? The earlier you catch a defect, the cheaper it is to fix. So the green and the blue boxes are favorable to the developers and to the testers because you have caught the defect early. But the extreme right-hand side, the orange box and the dark blue box, they are the defects through these test cases. The defects through these test cases are something which critique the product. Okay, so this is something not a good sign to have, because the product has already reached the shores of the customer. The customer is going to do the testing in majority of these cases. And obviously any defect what you will get is going to be exposed to the customer. Okay, so those are the 4 quadrants of this famous Lisa Crispin's model, which is there. And the cloud is the cloud information, what you see at the edges of these boxes is the testing approach or the testing tool which you're going to use. So is it first of all going to be a manual testing approach, or is it going to be an automated? So if you look at it, unit and component testing, the strong recommendation is to go for automated test cases. Okay, the blue color cloud on the top basically talks about what we have is a mix of automated. Okay, it is a mix of automated and manual. Okay, the brown color cloud on the top right is a manual. It's completely manual because that's where your business facing tests which critique the product. And of course, the underlying assumption is that a customer is not going to use any tools around it. And the last but not the least cloud at the extreme right hand side bottom is the tooling cloud which is there. Okay, so this is the basic model of the testing, which is the 4 quadrant testing model what we have. And of course, the intention here is not to explain the model. The intention is that how do I decide my strategy based on the position of these testing, various types of testing, right? What should be the way in which I should be carrying out testing? Okay, and again, I'll start with the easier one. Okay, let's start with an easier one. So maybe approach one. Approach one can be that I take an equal proportion of all the quadrants. May not work always. Okay, I take an equal proportion of quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, and quadrant 4. And maybe that is what helps me to come out with a kind of a test strategy approach which is there. Okay, again, remember one thing, that if you're using this from an, I mean, this is an agile testing quadrant model. If you're using it in an agile way of working, not all testing you will do it in a sprint. Remember this, okay? So there are some testing which you will do it when the code is hardened, when there's an integration which has been fixed up between 2 or 3 modules. You might want to push you might want to push the integration tests around that point in time. Or UAT is something which you will probably do more towards the MMP building. Okay, I'm just throwing some scenarios here. So this approach is very theoretical approach if you ask me, but nevertheless, I wanted to tell you that this is a possibility that you might want to have an equal proportion of test cases from each of this quadrant to start with. Okay, so first time when you're using this model, or first time when you're referencing this model, you might want to go ahead and play safe, and you might want to say that, okay, let me start with this as an approach, but may not work in the longer term. And especially when you become experienced with the product, when you have to do a lot of things around regression testing, this model obviously will change, because there will be a component of regression testing also in every sprint what you will have to do, right? You have to also do now, a lot of focus has to be on regression testing, especially when the building blocks of the product and its features are getting built. So this is one approach which is there. The second approach which you can think about is the testing cloud wise. Okay, I have a mix and match of automation and manual test cases. Okay, so rather than being focused on the quadrants, I say that as a strategy, over a period of time, I will have to increase my coverage of automation in my application, because I foresee that this application is a long drawn application. This application or a product is not going to die down soon. So definitely there'll be a lot of features which will be coming up in this product. It could be a product like a Netflix, or let's say an Amazon Prime, or let's say Ola Cabs. And I know that it's a long lasting application. It is not something which is a short term product which I've developed, which probably people will consume and forget about it. So this can be another approach. This can be another kind of a strategy or an approach which I have based on the cloud. Based on the cloud, I say that over a period of time, my maximum focus has to be on automated and manual. And yes, there will be some contribution from tooling. And you might even want to reduce your manual test coverage. Okay, I've kept it 25%, but you might want to make it 30% if you want to increase it, or you might want to even reduce it at any point in time. You might want to say that, okay, let me reduce it, or let me reduce the content of the manual testing. Again, testing is context dependent. Remember the principle of testing what we have. So depending on the principle of testing, you might want to contextualize it, the approach to which is there. Okay, again, the whatever approaches I'm going to show probably only 3 approaches here. These are not the only approaches. Just wanted to let you know there could be another permutation or a combination which can come out of this. Okay, and most of the times, before I reveal the approach 3, you end up in an amoeba diagram like this. You usually end up in an amoeba diagram like this, which basically cuts across, or in fact something like this. Something like this is what comes out as your test strategy approach when you actually plan for it, and when you try to actually create this test strategy. A kind of an amoeba diagram is something what comes out of it. Okay, so it may not be as straightforward boxes what you see there, and believe me, to reach to that boxes also it will take a lot of time. There will be a lot of trial and error which you will have to do, and you'll have to figure out which of those percentages are working for your product, right? Which of these percentage, and again, I'm repeating, don't spend too much time on this. Okay, it's like that estimation, like in agile we say that story point. Why story point is recommended is because we don't want to spend too much time on it. You can always go with a rule of thumb to begin with, and then you can refine these numbers as we go along, right? So testing cloud wise would be the second approach which can be tried out, or which can be thought about it. Okay, this is the second approach. The third approach could be basically on those 4 axis statements. How much focus would you like to have on technology facing tests? How much focus would you like to have on the tests which support the team? How much focus would you like to have on business facing tests? And how much focus would you like to have on tests which critique the product? And as you can see, when you try to use this approach, it will crisscross. It will crisscross across all the 4 quadrants. Okay, so that is what is going to happen, that when you focus yourself on these dimensions, that, okay, let me have, and this also depends on the kind of team you have. For example, if you have a good team of people who can actually learn the technology fast, then you might want to focus heavily on technology focus facing tests, a higher percentage there. Or it also depends on the application. Let's say an application like Netflix. Imagine having a 5-second lag in your favorite movie, I'm sure the experience will be very frustrating. So there, obviously, the technology focused tests will override all the other tests, right? I mean, we'll need to have all those scenarios about buffering or about able to stream a movie even in a low bandwidth or a low network environment. So definitely the technological facing tests will override all the other test cases which are there, right? And yeah, so as I said, it is a contextual model. I mean, this one approach 3 is purely contextual, depending on the kind of application. Like, for example, if it's an ATM kind of a product you're developing, obviously technological facing tests, which actually are more related to, I would say, tools, those will be important, right? Like security testing, code scanning. There should not be any attempt to actually intrude into the system, right? Then tests related to basically capturing face recognition software. If you are going to have that kind of a technology for anyone who's trying to withdraw cash from an ATM or do any transaction at an ATM. So again, you'll have to figure out that what will be the overall strategy, where will the focus be. Need not be again all equal. You might have a technological facing test having a higher weightage or a higher scope than, let us say, supporting the team, or basically, or you might want to say that, no, I want a higher focus of tests which critique the product even before it goes into a production, because then that will tell me where exactly is my problem, right? Why exactly are we getting so many defects in production? So I might want to, in the second round of testing, I might want to increase the focus on tests which critique the product. A higher percentage of those test cases is what I might like to propose as a part of this, right? So again, that's a third approach which is there. As I said, I have just tried to list some of the very popularly used approaches, something which we start with, but these are not the only approaches. I'm sure if you start exploring this model, or if you start thinking about it, uh, you will come out with some different shapes. As I said, usually we end up in an amoeba shape, where we try to take from each one of them a fixed percentage, or basically based on the, so sometimes we also do a defect based taxonomy. Like in the last iteration of this product, there were so many defects on a particular block. So we tend to increase the coverage of that, right? So there were a lot of, let's say, defects on story tests. So we say that more focus on story tests, maybe a lesser percentage of time on unit test cases. So those ratios will dynamically alter depending on the kind of runs we have had with testing in the past in the product, in our product, right? So this is the test cases which is based on the 4 testing quadrants which are there. On a side note, let me also tell you, there have been variations to this model. I'm not going into the details of this, but if you're academically inclined, do have a look at these models also, which are kind of a spin-off from this model. Okay, so Lisa Crispin and Gregory, they have come up with another somewhat similar model, which is in their book, More Agile Testing. Okay, then obviously Adzik has got a different interpretation of this 4-quadrant model. Hendrickson has come out with another interpretation, and Batch and Bolton have also come out with it. This is more from an academic interest point of view. I'm sharing this information, and do watch this. I mean, do have a look at these models which are there, right? Which will help you basically to understand that, yes, I mean, so this also gives us the opportunity to contextualize it, right? For example, in our industry, we don't have something called as, let us say, business facing. We have some different terminology for it. We can always go ahead and change it, or let's say we want to include some of the test cases here, which let's say many organizations have got this CRP test, conference room pilot. They call it as a conference room pilot, which is missing in that model. You might want to introduce that into it, right? So this obviously is a customizable model. You can and already there have been variations around it. There have been customizations around it. Okay, let us go to the next model, which is there, Moscow. I think we all know Moscow as a prioritization technique for features, right? And those of you who are from the agile world, I think they have heard about this Moscow, I think, umpteen number of times. What is Moscow? It is not a capital of Russia. Of course, it is capital of Russia, but more than that, it is in our world, it is must have, should have, could have, and won't have, right? So which are the features in a product which are must, which are should? Must have obviously is without which the product is a failure. Should have is that the product, we should be having it. It is good to have, not mandatory, but good to have. Could have and won't have. Now, the same analogy can be applied into our testing world. Okay, so let us say that there are some test scenarios which are must have. There are some test scenarios which are should have. There are some scenarios which are consider or could have. So here there's a slight variation. C is actually consider or could have. Okay. And yeah, W is not in this diagram, but you can have a W there. Now, this kind of a mind map, yeah, I was very happy in the earlier session when Claudia talked about mind map. Yeah, thanks, Claudia, for that. But yeah, this kind of a picture which is there, at one glance, you will come to know that which are the features or user stories. Whether you need to have these type of test cases in a must have, should have, could have, or won't have. Like here, it's a representative sample that definitely you're going to have unit, integration, system, regression, and UAT as a must have. Performance is should have. Performance, exploratory, quality, data validation, security, they are should have. And consider having disaster recovery or rollback, roll forward, rollback kind of test cases, or deployment rollback test cases as consider. Okay, so this is the mind map, what you see here, or a picture in front of you. If there are any assumptions or comments around it, you can write. What are the tools you're going to use and what environment you're going to operate on it is what you will be writing there. And if you look at it, there are some interesting legends there. Who's going to perform the testing? I know there's some problem with that color combination, but whether it's the project team or external team. Okay, so I'll change the color in the next version when I share this slide deck with you. So project team is a dark kind of a color which is there. External team is a lightweight color which is there. So who's going to do the testing? Is it the project team which is going to do the testing, or are we going to outsource it? That is the first distinguishing legend what we have. Then if you look at the testing type, is it A for automation, M for manual? Okay, so is it A for automation, M for manual, or AM is automated and manual both? That is the another mind map which is there. And NR is not required. Okay, NR is, it is not in scope or not required. Question mark is I need more clarity. It's like that question mark card in your poker cards which is there. So this kind of a testing needs more clarity, or more insights are needed for us to go ahead and do this kind of a testing. So this we call it as a test strategy on a plan, on a page, right? I use the this is an acronym which I have coined as SOAP, strategy on a page, or SOAP is what I call it. But this actually gives you that entire picture. It's like a signaling equipment in a railway guard's cabin, right? I mean, you see the entire picture of which train is going where is a red light, where is a green light, and are there any bottlenecks on the railway track? This kind of a mind map. And again, you can enrich it further. Not that you have to restrict yourself with this. You can always go ahead and enrich it further. You can add more information at the same time, keeping them in mind that this has to be leaner. This has to be comparatively a much more leaner approach which is there, right? So yeah, I mean, this strategy on a page which is based on the Moscow method of prioritization is something what we can also use. Okay, so that is what we have it as a part of the another approach which is there. Okay, so obviously in the interest of time, I'm not covering all the approaches, but just a side note discussion. Exploratory testing, even though we say exploratory testing is basically based on the intelligence of the tester, remember there is a strategy document which is created. Okay, and that strategy document is called as a test charter. Okay, so test charter is a document which is created as a part of exploratory testing, right? So exploratory testing, if you're doing, and it could be again be for a traditional way of software development, or it could be on an agile way of software development, we still create a test strategy document, which is called as a test charter. I mean, that's what is called as a test charter in an exploratory testing world, what we have. Okay. One of the last models I will cover. And again, as I said, these are some of the ones which I have used. Maybe you can create a matrix-like structure like this. Okay, so you have the different modules here. And again, you can prioritize them based on the risk, which is the most riskiest model would be on the top. The least riskiest model will be on the bottom. And then how much of coverage you would like to have from a unit, functional, performance, and security testing. How much of coverage? Again, these are representative color codes which I have given here. Not that it will be a right data which I'm showing here, but let us say if you want a particular matrix to have 80 to 100% of coverage, obviously that will be marked in red. Okay, but 60 to 79% would be around the yellow zone which is there. 40 to 59 will be low coverage zone. Gray would be that, okay, we might want to skip it for the time being. We might want to do it, do this kind of a testing at a later point in time. And again, Within that modules, you can mention the sub modules also there. You can actually create this as a 3-dimensional grid, where actually you can also construct a kind of a modules which are internally also prioritized. So within the digital payment modules, payment by credit card could be a higher module. Payment by, let us say, a debit card would be a low module. And let's say payment by UPI could be a very, very super high from a coverage perspective, right? So that can be another strategy or another approach of what you could be formulating, right? As I said, the sky is the limit. And I'm sure by the time you go through this presentation, by the time we meet for the next event of Game of Testing, I'm sure you would have come out with your own approach. You would have come out with your own strategy or a own approach, or you might be already having it, which probably you will be more than happy to hear about it when we go for a Q&A session. I'll be more than happy to hear about it. But the whole idea is, and of course the conference name is Game of Testing, is that you have to invent it. I mean, as a test analyst, as a test manager, as a test strategist, this is something which this will be a value add to your organization, or this would be the key transformation lever which will help you to move testing from a very, very traditional approach of having a kind of a Word document and then trying to figure out, okay, when is each phase starting, and then trying to come out with a strategy, rather than do everything on a whiteboard, right? I mean, all these strategies which I have told you, all you need is a whiteboard for this, okay? A plain whiteboard, or of course, if you're working in a remote way of working, you need a Zoom kind of a call like this, or a digital whiteboard where you can formulate the strategy, and Excel. That's it. I mean, Excel, PowerPoint, and a whiteboard. I think only these three things are needed to formulate a test strategy approach like this, right? And believe me, when I say on a one page, yeah, I mean, initially it may not be on a one page, it might go into a 2 or 3 pages, but definitely the overarching ambition or a goal would be to trim it, to get it on a single page, so that we get a view, we get a holistic view about where exactly is the approach or a mind map of test strategies all about. So yeah, so these were some of the strategies which I covered. And I always believe that whatever strategy you pick up, right, it has to be efficient, it has to be effective, it should help our organization, it should help our client. And at the same time, the most important of this, the business outcomes is something which should be, the strategy should be able to achieve, right? At the end of the day, we as a testing community, we are indirectly and directly contributing to the business outcomes of our customer, and test strategy document plays a very, very crucial role. Okay. And I try to call it that the strategy comprises of 4 elements, the tool part of it, right? Selecting the right tool, selecting the right automation and manual strategy, a mix and match of that. That is the second element of it, tool, automation. The third one is the process, right? And I have tried to talk about the process during last 30-35 minutes, where my focus has been more on the right process. See, tool, automation strategy, you can always figure it out, right? But if your process is weak, believe me, the best of the best tools and the best of the best automation strategy is going to fail. Ultimately, your tool and automation strategy has to be linked with those 7 principles, the 7 fundamental principles of testing, which I talked about in the first session, right? And last but not the least is the testing overall overarching strategy, what we have. So those are the 4 elements, or those are the 4 key elements what we have from a testing strategy perspective, which we have. So on that note, I end my session. But again, happy to have any questions, happy to be connected with all of you. In case you don't get an opportunity to ask a question here, feel free to connect with me any point in time. And once again, thanking the organizers of Games of Testing. First of all, wonderful conference organized, and we are kicking it on a right note, the pre-conference. And yeah, there are a few more days of excitement ahead with more speakers coming in. And thanks to the team for giving me an opportunity to speak here. Yeah, open for any questions which you have. Anyone, any questions? Yeah, I did see one question there. I think it was from Suresh. Can we use risk-based strategy for automation and manual both? Yes. Risk-based testing strategy can be applied for manual testing as well as for automation testing. It's not a function of the testing type. In fact, I don't even like to use the word manual and automation separately. I consider them as both. I mean, both as a part of testing. We unnecessarily have created that silo between manual and automation testing. Yeah. Any other question anyone has?
I think
Thanks, Karen.
Ashutosh, there was a question. I think not a question. Like it's like, could you please share a sample doc here? Maybe if you want to share anything.
Yeah, I'll definitely share the presentation with the team, and yeah, I mean, I'll definitely put it in the drive what you have shared, and I'll definitely put whatever material I have in that drive. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe Ashutosh, I have a question because first of all, this session, the strategy is always it's kind of make me confused most of the times, like being in testing area for